following year. I was out of town. But they did learn from my mistake, and they borrowed the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliaries oil containment floats from Evansville, Indiana, and they have a much deeper draft sitting deep underwater, and it worked much better. They probably didn't have as much fun as we did, but it worked for them very well. So anyway, this next story is kind of related to that. It is not about a rubber duck, but it is about a goose. Now, I've had a few requests to tell this story from those of you who have been here before, so I've always got to tell this story. And this was one day, well, to give you a little background, the rivers are getting so much healthier and cleaner every year. We're a success story on the rivers in this country. And one of the things on the Wabash River that we were aspiring to do was to bring back the freshwater mussels because they're good for the waters. And they're protected, and they help filter the water. Well, some days I have time, I go up the river and I see them get stranded, because when the river's high, it drops really fast, they get stranded on these sandbars, and they die, or the raccoons will get them. So I just pull over, it's fun too, chuck it back in the river and go on. And so I was doing that one day, came around a bend of a river, and I heard this terrible sound. And I didn't know what it was at first till I got closer, but what it was this big goose tangled in a trot line. Now, a trot line is a milk jug, they put a line on it, they anchor it, they put fish hooks on the lines and bait it, and they come back once a day to see if they caught any fish. You don't know harm done, but somehow this big goose got himself into that thing, and there were hooks in him, and he was flipping around, and that milk jug was wrapped around his neck, and he was in big trouble. He wasn't going to make it. And so I wanted to help him, but I attempted to help him from my boat. I was not able to do that. And so I knew I had to go in. So I tied my boat off about 20 feet ahead there to a tree, got my knife, jumped in and swam back to this goose to cut him loose. Well, then his attention got off his problem and on me. I was the enemy. And as I tried to get close, he was circling, facing me, lashing out at me. And every time I got close, well, if you've ever been slapped by a 3-foot wet wing, you know you've been slapped. It hurts. And I was getting bit. And he was formidable. He was a huge goose. And so many attempts I made to try to get close, and then I made a bad decision. I thought, I'll just dive down and cut the anchor line. And so that's what I did. I got my knife, I dove down, felt around, felt that anchor line, cut that anchor line. Well, that made the problem worse, because he still was tangled up in that line. He wasn't going to be able to fly. He may be getting injured, and now he had more maneuverability. So then the wrestling match began again in the water, and I was getting exhausted. He was winning this battle, even though I was trying to help him. He didn't know that. So after getting bit and getting lumps and all these things, just about to give up, I thought, I've got to get him to shore. This is the only way I'm going to help him. He's on the land, not in this water. And so finally, I got a hold of him, one arm around his body, and began to tow him toward shore, aided by the fact that he had a hold of my earlobe. You notice this was longer than the other one? So, got him to shore. Now, you remember like I said, the river had been high, it dropped very fast. What does that leave along the riverbank? Mud. Deep, thick, gooey, boot-sucking mud. And it was muddy. And so, I sometimes entertain the idea of mud wrestling. I really have. But not with a big goose. I would that day. After dragging him up into that shoreline, the fight began again. Rolling around in the mud, trying to get control of this powerful goose. I had no idea they were that strong. And so this went on for quite a while, and once again I was losing the battle. I was getting exhausted. And I had to get control of this goose. And so, well, finally, once again, I got one arm around his body, his wings, and I got a hold of that beak. Now, once I got a hold of that beak, I wasn't letting go. And his neck was so strong, it was really hard to do. And I just had to get my breath back. I had to breathe a little bit. And so did he. Because what I had discovered, part of my hand was over those 2 little nostrils on his beak, too. And so I had to adjust a little without letting go so he could breathe, too. And so once I finally got that good of a hold on him, I just laid there in the mud, just trying to get my breath back. And he was still struggling somewhat. And then once I started talking, hoping that maybe this would calm him down a little bit. so I could help him. And I talked, and then I began to sense that he was indeed relaxing, this goose was. I felt him relaxing. And well, this was good, so don't stop talking, Jared, just keep on talking. And I continued to do that and do that. And as I did, I began to loosen my grip a little bit to test it. And wasn't starting the fight up again. Continued this because I had to let go of him to get all those lines and hooks out. I needed both hands to do that. And so this continued for a long time, and then came the time I had to let go of that beak. It was a little scary. He'd already given me a lot of lumps for that beak. And so I let go. And he didn't do a thing. In fact, he started to mumble, kind of a goose mumble. I didn't know geese could mumble, but he was. And I still never stopped talking. And so I let go, and the fight was over. That's the day I discovered I was a goose whisperer, by the way. So, continued to talk, and let go with the other hand. He stood there, still mumbling, and I still talking. Then I could help him. And I got the knife, I started cutting those lines. Now, fortunately, the hooks weren't in his skin so much as they were in the feathers. So that was great. And I didn't know if he was injured. If he was, I would try to get him to the federal rehab area nearby for wildlife, but I sure didn't want to try to get him in my boat, much less my car, and do these battles over again. But I was hoping he would be able to fly. I wasn't injured. So I was carefully unwrapping these and pulling the lines out and getting the hooks out and sitting on it, making a pile right next to me, all the time talking to this goose. Did not want to break that continuity. And so finally, it appeared as though I got everything out. I could see no more. And a pile next to me, and he was still sitting there chatting with me. And so I told him, I said, well, I want to see you fly now so I can go home. I need to go take care of my wounds that he inflicted on me. And so I gave him a little nudge, and well, he got into the river. He made the sensible choice. He couldn't fly like that. He had to have a bath. He had mud all over him. You can't fly with that mud on you. So this goose started flipping around in the water, dipping down, getting that mud off of him. Well, I needed a bath too. So I jumped in with him. And here's this goose and I, side by side bathing, and still talking the whole time. And so finally, I swam back to my boat. And with what little strength I had left, I pulled myself up into that boat, ready to go home. And I wanted to watch him fly first before I left. What did the goose do? Follow me to the boat. He wasn't done talking yet. I explained to him I need to go home. Would you please fly so I can do that? And well, finally, he swam out into the channel, turned into the wind, began that run, and he lifted off. It was a beautiful sight. And he circled around and he honked a couple of times. I know that goose was saying thank you. There's no doubt in my mind. And he flew off to the north. And my cabin was 8 miles to the south, so I turned around and headed back down there. And I thought a lot about that goose that night as I nursed my wounds, and it was all worth it. And the next morning I got up though, and I heard a familiar sound. Yeah, out of my dock, the goose had came visiting. I don't know how I knew where I lived. Everyone out there knew me. I guess the critters did too, because there he was. And that was great. I walked out to the dock and we visited for a while, chatted, and then he left. I thought, well, that's icing on the cake. He came by for a visit. But the next day he came back again, stayed a little longer. The following day he stayed longer yet. This went on day after day, and longer stays until the day he did not leave. This goose adopted me. And he was there all the time. Now, well, not all the time. Sometimes he'd leave for a few days and come back. But, a fellow's got to have some time alone. I get that. And so, but he became known for people to be at my dock there all the time. And he would even come up around the house. He would walk to the mailbox with me, which is a long walk. Then he got to where he'd get in my boat and ride the boat sometimes. And so he did become pretty well known. And so, well, one day I had a visitor. And this visitor, my son, came by with his girlfriend, Crystal, and she said she was visiting. And what she was doing, by the way, I did not feed this goose. I wanted him to remain wild. And I did not feed him. I didn't want him to depend on me. I was gone for a month at a time usually. And so he needed to keep his independence and stay wild. But okay, now then I might share a sandwich with him, but only if it's wheat bread. He didn't like white bread. So anyway, this girl was there and she said, "What's your goose's name?" I thought that's interesting because I said, "He's not my goose. I never gave him a name. He's a wild critter. And he didn't belong to me. He's a friend. But he's there because he wants to be, not to get fed." And so she said, "Well, you know, he hangs around this dock like it's an island." And she said, "Can I call him Gilligan?" I said, "I don't care. Call him whatever you want. It doesn't make any difference to me." Well, that caught on. He became known as Gilligan. People come to know that name and use that name enough that he recognized that name. To the point where I could go out on the dock if he wasn't there and call out that name, he'd come flying in, this goose would. And then, well, you know, I still didn't want to acknowledge too much ownership, but being the victim that I am, I finally put a sign on the dock, named it Gilligan's Landing. I wouldn't go with Island, Gilligan's Landing. So anyway, we had a great summer, this goose and I. And he was just a great friend. And so fall came, and I saw something happening. I recognized it. We're on a migratory path. The geese land there all the time, including the swans. And so they'd land there, and he was out mingling with them. I think he was selecting a flock to migrate with. And I thought, well, that's part of nature. And so, what about the third one? He did. He left. He headed south. And I thought, well, I'm going to miss that goose, but that's the natural order of things. I accept it. So we had a pretty brutal winter that year. But guess what happened the following spring? He came back. I was so happy to see that goose, I called my friends and we had a party for him. They all gathered around. He mingles quite nicely with crowds. And so everyone loved that goose. And he stayed once again. Now, this process went on for a long time, actually. And during that time, I actually was telling that story to an audience about this goose. And, well, a lady came up to me afterwards and she said, "You know, I work for a publisher who do children's books. They were located in Tiburon, California." And she said, "Well, that would be a great children's book, that story." And so I thought, well, that's kind of entertaining, but I said, "I don't know anything about children's books. I write river books." And she said, "Well, we can help you with that." And so I didn't really take it serious, and we exchanged cards until I got a call from her boss, and he said, "Now, Linda Kramer says this will make a good book. It will make a good book." She said, "We're going to fly you out here and talk about that." I thought, well, that's kind of unusual. I've never done a children's book, and they're offering to fly me out there and put me up. And so, okay, it's your dime. Wasn't taking it that seriously. And got out there. Well, the result of that meeting became a children's book called A Goose Named Gilligan, with the story that I just told you. And the illustrator, I've never really met the illustrator, but she just did a wonderful job on all the illustrations. And what she did, I'm in the book, so she took off about 20 pounds, 10 years. I sent her old pictures, what can I say? But anyway, all the characters are real, the story is real. I was adamant about not embellishing the story. And that's my cat Buffy, if you can see that page right there. Everyone's real in there, who is a good friend of Gilligan's. And anyway, it's a very popular book. Bad news is, it's out of print now. Can't get it anymore. I usually get a bigger all than that. Thank you. It is out of print. You can buy used ones on Amazon, but I understand they're quite expensive. It now became a collector's item. But good news is, in a more recent book, Beyond the Bridges, there's an entire chapter of stories. Many more stories than I have time to tell you here today about our adventures together. And this book is a blend of river history, practical information, and river stories. And that chapter on Gilligan, that's the one that gets all the good reviews. Everybody talks about those adventures we had together. So we had that in the gift shop, and you know, if you buy one, you would like me to sign it, I'll be happy to. But not only will I do it, Gilligan will sign it. And now he can't be here himself, but up in the chart room, I have a rubber stamp of his footprint. How's that for marketing, huh? It's greatly reduced, of course. His foot's the size of my hand. But anyway, I'd be happy to do that. It's in there. But often people will say, well, what's the rest of the story? When does this story end? Did it end? And they brace themselves for something tragic, but it's really not so tragic. This went on for 8 years. from 2000 to 2008. And the reason it ended then is because in 2008, the Wabash River flooded terribly. And my old cottage on the river was destroyed. It's washed away, it's gone. And I did not rebuild. Now, when I was gone on the river for jobs and as a Riverlorian, Gilligan wasn't around. He'd leave. And when I come back, he'd come back. I don't know how he knew. But the friend people who lived around there said, I never see that goose when you're gone. And so I built a home in a different part of the state on the Ohio River and 400 feet above the river. And so when I left, he left. I have not seen him since. So I'd like to think he's still out there, maybe enriching someone else's life. So it's not a tragic end, but if you happen to see me a big flock of geese and I'm out of the boat calling Gilligan, you'll know why. I know he would answer if he was out there, for sure. So anyway, so it's not really that bad a story, but I've got a couple minutes here left. I want to share maybe one or two more short stories with you about